So hi guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Ayodele Akeola. In this video I'd like us to talk about the history of the Yorubas, and we'll be taking a cue from the book titled The History of the Yorubas from the Early Times to the British Protectorate. The book was written by Rev Samuel Johnson. But before we continue, I'd like you to hit the subscribe button on this channel and also turn on the notification button so when next I'm uploading a new video, you'll be the first to be notified. So in this video, I'll be talking about the first chapter of the book, and I'll try my best to summarize it so that we won't miss the important events being recorded in the book. But before we continue, let us know some things about the author, who is Reverend Samuel Johnson. So who is Samuel Johnson? Well, Samuel was born in Sierra Leone to Johnson and Sarah Johnson. His father, whose name is Henry Johnson, is a Yoruba prince and is the grandson of the Alaafin of Oyo, the former Alaafin of Oyo named Alaafin Abiodun of the 18th century. It was as a result of slave trade that Henry, who happens to be Samuel's father, found himself in Sierra Leone when their ship was rerouted to Sierra Leone. But there is no so much talk about if Henry married in Sierra Leone or in Nigeria. But for the fact that he had kids in Sierra Leone, in which Samuel happens to be the his third child, proves the point that it was in Sierra Leone he got married and had kids. So some years later, Samuel's father returned to Nigeria while he worked as an assistant to one David Indara while Samuel pursued his education. And at the later part of Samuel's life, he worked as a schoolmaster and later as a chartist. So what prompted Samuel to write this book? It was according to him, it was as a result of his patriotism to the Yoruba race, because there was no record of the Yoruba history written in anywhere. And unlike the British, the Greeks, the Roman, we could read their legend, their stories in anywhere. But unfortunately, for the Yorubas, there was nothing of such recorded about them. And there have been a lot of important events happening. But for the Yorubas, we don't have any of such happening. So he decided to go on to write something down so that the coming generations like me and you can come across. So his sources for this book were actually oral sources and his personal experiences. So the oral sources he depended on for this book particularly were actually drummers and cymbalists that lived in the palace, because this set of people are always close to the palace and they are aware of the daily activities in the palace and what goes on in the palace every day. But unfortunately, he never lived to see this book being published. So what happened? The church mission society refused to publish the book. So he actually reached out to a publisher in England to help him publish the book after preparing the manuscript, which was sent to the publisher. But unfortunately, the publisher claimed that the manuscript were lost, so he couldn't publish it. So within that period, around the year 1901 or so, he passed away. But his brother, which happens to be one of the editors of the book, was able to rewrite the manuscript because he had copies of the written papers. So he actually tried his best to rewrite the book, and he sent it out again to another publisher. And this time around again, the book, the manuscript, was on its way to England, and the ship was seized during the World War I. But luckily for them, they were able to get this book published. But if you are looking for copies of this book, I think you can get them on Amazon. So if you are interested in buying the hard copies of the book, you can just go onto Amazon and search for the book, and you'll be able to get them there, both the soft and hard copies, so you could buy it, and on your own leisure time you can read the book. In the first part of this chapter, the writer talked about the origin and the early history of the Yorubas. In the early times, the Yoruba history was not written down, mostly maybe because the Yoruba language wasn't a lettered language then. So it was probably it was represented with symbols. So important events that happened in history were only passed to from generations to generation via oral transfer, that is being spoken words. So just like the NCBD of the Igbo language, Igbo people. So um, probably the Yoruba still have a writing system that is being represented with symbols instead of letters. So that might have contributed to the reason why we didn't have history written down. So we were told that Lamorudu, who actually Yoruba sprung from, was actually a king in Mecca, and he had a son named Oduduwa, along with two other children. One happens to be the king of Kokua, and there's another king. But both the other two kings are believed to be kings in some Hausa community somewhere. So it was made us we were made to believe that there was actually a revolution in Mecca then. There was a crisis in Mecca that made the children of Oduduwa to the children of Lamorudu to flee from Mecca. So the problem with this story was that Lamorudu, the period in which he reigned in Mecca, it was never recorded in history. Even in Saudi Arabia, in the Arabs, there was a story of such, and also there was never recorded in history about an important event like that, whereby there was actually a revolution in Mecca. So such important event like that shouldn't have gone unnoticed, but unfortunately it wasn't recorded, so it shed more light to doubt that that story actually existed. But let us continue. So it was claimed that Oduduwa, who is actually a prince, a crown prince in Mecca, was an idol worshipper and was trying to convert the whole state into idol worshipping from Islam, the followers of Muhammad then. So he had a priest named Asara. So this priest have a son named Brahma. But this the son of this priest, whose name is Brahma, was actually brought up in an Islamic way. So the priest is a sculptor as well. He carves sculpture. He carves sculpture. Sorry. So when Brahma was young, the father always sent him to, hawk and sell the artifacts which are idol in nature, because then they worship these images that they've been carved out. So the boy was always reluctant to go for those errands, but he had no choice than to go. So whenever he's trying to hawk it or trying to hawk the sculptures, he's always going around screaming that who wants to buy falsehood, who wants to buy falsehood, because I'm selling falsehood. So as the year goes, there was a period where they wanted to celebrate one of their idol festival. So the prince Oduduwa issued a communique out to the people that to celebrate this festival, all the men should go hunting for 3 days. So to prepare them for the festival. So all the men in the city actually went on hunting spree then, which Brahma was left behind. So this young man now took advantage of the absence of the men in the city and vandalized and defaced all the idols in the temple. So by the time these people got back, they were actually enraged and furious about what had happened to their gods, and Brahma was actually summoned to speak on what happened. So when they called him, and he appeared right according to the story that we were told, and even the writer said. So when he came, he was now like taunting the idol worshippers by saying that who did it, and his own followers were now responding that can he speak? And it was not like turning to something of a mockery. It too was not responding that why are they worshipping something that couldn't speak? So this now caused much enrage between the idol worshippers, and the tension was high, and Bama was sentenced to death on a burning stake to be burnt alive. So he already has his own set of followers, who and also backers, because there are Muslims there. So they also believed in the Muslim side supported Brahma for what he did, but the idol worshippers were all calling for his head. So it now turned to a conflict that almost resulted into a civil war. So Lamurudu, the father of Oduduwa, was actually killed, and his children, which Oduduwa and his other siblings, had to flee from Mecca. So Oduduwa and his siblings, they actually fled Mecca, while Oduduwa headed here eastwards, which is today Ife, while his brothers, that is who actually became the king of Gubiri and the king of Kukua, they actually went westward, and they founded a Hausa community. So upon arriving Ife, Oduduwa actually met with somebody named Agbomiregun, or we can call him Setilu. So, and this person is actually the founder of Ifa worship. So that was actually the story that we were told. But this story, there are some errors that I like us to shed more light on, based from the perspective of the writer of this book. So in the early times, Mecca is a popularly known city, and there was no king that actually recorded such an important event happening in Mecca. So it actually raised some doubts on the story. Then when we look at the culture, the customs, and the way of life of the Arabian people and the Yoruba people, we can see that they are so different. So how come can we now say that we came from Mecca? Then also, according to the writer, he, based on his own idea, philosophy and idea, a logic, he felt, okay, since Mecca is from the east, and we might have migrated from the east. That is, we the Yorubas might have migrated from the east. When they found themselves in new land, they are trying to hold importance to themselves. So maybe they try to tell their new hosts that oh, they are from Mecca. They are from Mecca. So because it's actually pointing to the east. So maybe that was even one of the reasons why these people claimed that we originated from Mecca. So when a story is being told, passed from one generation to another without being debunked or being refuted, it now becomes a truth. So maybe that was how the story came about. Just like one of the stories they told us while growing up, that Mango Park discovered River Niger, which happens to be a lie, because there are people living around the river, and they have been fishing around on that same river even decades before Mango Park existed, or it was even born. So you see, something like that, because no one challenges, it questioned that story, that oh, why do you really think we came from Mecca? What's the name of our father's land? Where's our father's compound? And all those stuff. So nobody could challenge it. So years after years, it now became the truth. One of the people who actually have this written down was Sultan Bello of Sokoto, who is actually the founder of Sokoto city. So, and he's a very powerful Fulani king, emir, because the Fulanis, they use emir instead of king. So who is this our ancestor named Lamurudu, from the story that we'll be hearing so far? Well, the Lamurudu, we don't know, but there are some similarities between the name Lamurudu and the name Nimrod. So I know we don't even know which of the Nimrod it is. Maybe it could be the Nimrod, the strong from the Bible, or there was another Nimrod like that. So we don't even know which of the Nimrod it was, because it wasn't recorded. That is, our story wasn't recorded, so we couldn't actually pinpoint to which year or which period in the early times it happened. But let us try to understand this Nimrod. Maybe it could shed more light to us to know where we are going to on this our story. So it was believed that the descendants of this Nimrod, which are the Phoenicians, they actually led the war to Saudi Arabia, and after the war they lived there and settled there for some period of time until they were driven out as a result of religious persecution, because they were not practicing the religion of their host. So, and the Muslims, they feel these people are not ungodly and all that, so they actually expelled them from the land, and they were driven out of Saudi Arabia, and some of the children, they escaped to some part of Africa. So part of it they landed in Africa is a land called Yaba. So this Yaba is an Hausa term for Yoruba, which is where they actually carved the name Yoruba from. So what about if the East that has been talked about by our ancestors, the Mecca that our people are talking about, which is actually from the East, our ancestors were talking about, is actually from Upper Egypt, which is Nubia, or and this region shares border with Sudan, and in the early times those regions were called Sudan. So what if our ancestors actually migrated from Upper Egypt, that they've been mistaken for Mecca? So I'd like us to also explore that line of story according to the writer of this book. Now, if we are going to claim that we migrated from someone, or which have a close relationship with a group, we need to share common traditions with them and common lifestyles. So now, if we say we migrated from Upper Egypt, which is Nubia, today in the Yoruba land, we have the staff of Oramion, which has similarities with the obelisk in Egypt and can be found anywhere. So this obelisk, like I said, that has similarities with the staff of Oramion. The staff was buried at the passive site where Oramion was buried. So the staff, with the similarities with the Egyptian obelisk, it points to the fact that maybe the Yoruba people have a Phoenician origin. Maybe, like I said, maybe we are part of the offspring of descendant of Nimrod I've talked about. So from the stories I've talked about so far, we can only bring out the similarities that goes in line with our current state, and to make some deductions. They might be true and they may be false. But firstly, we need to understand, according to the story that we'll go by, and try to validate it according to what the writer wrote. It could be that the Yorubas actually migrated from Upper Egypt, which is in Nubia. Or secondly, maybe they were subjects to this Nimrod, who they call their ancestor, and they followed him to Saudi Arabia, where they led the war to Saudi Arabia, and they eventually settled down and started a life for them after the war. From there, they were due to religious persecution, they were driven out of Mecca. Maybe they were driven out of Mecca within that period, and they actually found their way back to Africa, where they migrated to, where they now settled down in Ile-Ife today. But the religious persecution we talked about, probably not, they might not even be idol worshippers, but maybe they could be some kind of Coptic Christians, I know, because Christianity also have this part that they worship image, like the image of Jesus, the image of Mary and all that. So I know all those image worshipping is kind of disgusting to the Muslims, so they might have pushed them out as a result of that. So now the priest named Asara that we talked about earlier. So according to the Arabs, it's being called Ansara. I know Ansara to the Arabs is what they use for Christians in the early times, because they see them as followers of Jesus. So they see them as Ansara. So probably they might not even be idol worshippers, like I said, and maybe our ancestors already had some close contacts with Christianity then. before they were driven out. Maybe that was part of the reasons why they were driven out of Mecca then. And also, according to the Muslims, there is always a saying that when Oduduwa migrated from Mecca, and when he came to Ile-Ife, he came with a Holy Quran, with a book whose content is the Holy Quran. But unfortunately, these have also sounds not to be true, because this sacred relic is called Idi, and we've seen a lot of Quran all around today, and none of the Qurans have actually venerated that story by pointing out that, oh, the content in this relic and the Quran are the same. So hopefully, probably they might not be true. So like I said, there might be symbolic text. I told you earlier that our people might have a writing system which is in symbol. So it might actually be symbolic text about some religious, but we don't know. But we are only trying to dispel, validate and dispel whatever story we've been fed with. So I'm also trying to look at this story from the perspective of the writer of this book we are talking about. So that being said, let's continue with the story. So as we have been told, Oduduwa migrated to Ife and settled down in Ile-Ife, and he has a son named Okambi. So when Oduduwa arrived in Ife, he swore that, okay, based on what had happened to him, where he was coming from, and how they killed his father, so he swore that, oh, he's going to take revenge on Mecca by going back there to fight to avenge the death of his father. Unfortunately, he couldn't make that come to pass because he died before he could fulfill his promise. So after Akambi died, after Oduduwa died, sorry, life went on. His son Akambi. So Akambi too also died. But prior to when Akambi died, because he died as a king of Ife, so he had 7 children, which were 2 princesses and 5 princes. So these 7 children of Okambi were actually the progenitors of the Yoruba race, and I will dissect them for you. Like Okambi's first daughter, which was a princess, she actually married her father's priest, and she's the mother of the Oluwu of Owu, who is actually the Oluwu of Owu. So she is the mother of the king that became the Oluwu of Owu. So his second child is also a princess. She also married someone, and she's actually, and her son actually became the Alakitu of Ketu, who became the king of the Ketu tribe, the Ketu people. So we call him Alakitu of Ketu. The third, who is actually a prince, became the Oba of Benin. Then the fourth, who is also a prince, became the Oragun of Ila. And the fifth actually became the Onishabe of Shabe. Then the sixth is actually the Onipupu of Pupu. And the last but not the least, which is the seventh child, and the youngest, which is Oranyo or Oramiyo. So this Oramiyo is actually the progenitor of the proper Yoruba people, because he's actually the father of the people of Oyo, and it was actually from Oyo that the Yoruba spread out from. So Oranyo was the youngest of the children of Okambi, and also the youngest of the grandchildren of Oduduwa. Eventually, he was the richest among his siblings, and how he became rich, I'm going to explain to you according to the story. So, after the demise of their grandfather Oduduwa, his wealth was shared among his grandchildren. So, the Oba of Benin inherited their grandfather's money, which is wealth, which is money, represented in cowries. Then the Oragun of Ila inherited his grandfather's wives. The king of Shabe inherited his grandfather's cattle. Then the Onupopo of Popo inherited his grandfather's beads. So Olowu inherited his grandfather's garments, while Onupopo of Popo, Alaketu of Ketu inherited his grandfather's crowns. Then nothing was left for Oranya accept the land. Some stories claim that he was absent during his grandfather's death and when they were sharing the properties, because he went for a warlike expedition. Sorry. So when he returned, although when the property that he was given to, which was the land, he was pretty much satisfied with it. So since he owns the land, he began charging his siblings an annual fee for them to use the land, and they paid him in wives, in cattle, in clothing, and all that. So his siblings were actually paying him in portions of what they got as their own inheritance from their grandfather, as a part of the fee they could use to, remain on the land, because since they all depended, their survival actually depends on the land. So his siblings were actually rulers of different provinces on the land, which are somehow indirectly independent, which are somehow indirectly independent of the central kingdom. But while Orion was actually placed on his grandfather's kingdom, simply because he owns the land. And there was a Yoruba saying then that Allah Filonile. So since he was the owner of the land, he automatically became the ruler of the land. So the writer also told us about another story of how Orania became the Alaafin and how he became the ruler of the land and all that. So I'm going to share you the story too, although the story is also in the book. So I'm going to share you part of the story here. So according to this second story by the writer, he claimed that then the surface of the earth was covered with water, and Orion had a sack with him, and the sack contained sands, which represented the earth, and a cock and 21 pieces of irons. So from where he was standing, he actually poured out the sand in the sack on the surface of the water, and he brought out his cock and dropped it on the sand, and the cock was spreading the sand on the surface of the water. So while the cock was spreading the sand on the surface of the water, the land started expanding and growing and expanding. So that was actually how land came about. Although all these are just myths and stories. So at the end of the day, his siblings, because they needed the land so much, they agreed to pay rent to him so that they could have a portion of the land to themselves. So what these two stories actually told us is that Orion was more successful than his siblings. So now let us continue with our story. So Orion at that time was a hunter and a warrior. So after some time, he decided that he wants to take revenge for his grandfather on the humiliation they faced in Mecca. So he actually summoned his brothers that they should go on an expedition to take a revenge expedition against Mecca. Unfortunately, the mission didn't go successful, and I'm going to explain what happened to you. So then Orion was strong enough. He had a lot of men behind him. So he summoned his brother that, come, let us go on a revenge for what happened to our grandfather. And although all of them didn't agree to go with him, except the most eldest of his senior brother that agreed to go with him. So they embarked on that journey. So they actually went through the routes that their grandfather took when escaping from Mecca to where he finally settled in. So that was the same route they took on the journey. But along the road, they saw an obstacle on the road and they couldn't continue the journey on that road path. So they decided to go through another route, and this new route they decided to go through was the Tapa land, which is in Niger which is around the Niger River area. So that was the route they decided to go on. So while they were on the journey, they decided to have some relaxations. So at that point when they were having relaxations, there was disagreement between Orania and his elder brother. So as a result of the disagreement, the elder brother decided that, come, he's not going to lead that. You are the youngest. I cannot be under your command. So they both splitted, and they both went different ways. So that was how Orania decided to go on the journey by himself. So as Orion got to Takpaland, he continued his journey to the bank of River Niger. So by getting there, he wanted to cross the river, but the locals there didn't allow him cross the road. So due to that, he couldn't force them, and he couldn't have his way in crossing the road. So he decided to, relax a little and before he continued his journey. The journey became futile as the locals didn't permit him to cross the river. Then he decided to go back to where he was coming from, which was Ile-Ife. So on the other hand, he had some thoughts that if he decided to go back to Ife, with his status on how strong and powerful he is, that it's going to be an insult for him, and it's going to be humiliating for him to return, since I guess he already boasted that he was going to revenge his grandfather's ill treatment in Mecca, and heading that route and coming back empty-handed without any news of a success in the war on the journey. It's going to feel traumatized, and so he decided that it's at this point he doesn't think he has to return back to Ife, but let him find somewhere else to start his life. So the land he camped on, he had to consult the king of the land. I think, yeah, the king of Ibariba, that this is his current dilemma, and he just needed a land where he could just settle on. There was a folklore that was said about this story. According to the folklore, we were being told that the king made a charm and placed it on a boa snake. So he now told Orion that you should follow that snake, the snake, that anywhere the snake settles down for 7 days and disappear, it's going to be where he should make his final settlement. Orion did as he was told by the king. He actually followed the snake, until the snake got to the hill of a town called Ajaka. So it was from there that the snake disappeared, and Orion decided to, build a settlement for himself there and start a new life there. And Orion actually named that place Oyoajaka. From there, Orion was more successful and prosperous, and his children, expanded from that spot across the land, both east, west, north, and south. There I will end my story, and I hope you enjoyed them. You enjoyed my boring story. But if you wish to learn more about the Yoruba history according to this book, you can get a copy of this book on Amazon. Initially at the beginning of this video, I never planned searching for the book or dropping a link for you, but so that to satisfy your curiosity and you're inquisitive to know more about this, and I decided to search for it, and I dropped a link to get the book on Amazon. So you could check the description below. You're going to find the book there. So the title of the book is The History of the Yorubas, from the earliest times to the beginning of the British Protectorate. So the book was actually written by Rev Samuel Johnson. So it's a good book to read. You're going to pick one or two things about the Yoruba history there. Some of these informations you might have known before, they might sound familiar to you, while some other informations you are just getting to, learn them. So, education we learn every day. So you could just get this book, and read it and get some more information about the Yorubas, because it has some more interesting chapters in the book. Although I'm not trying to validate the content of the book to be true, and also I'm not trying to cancel the content of the book as being wrong, but we are only reading it trying to know the mind and the perspective of the writer, because according, at the beginning of this video I already told you the writer's story on this book, where the sources were actually oral sources, words of the mouth, and also his own personal experiences. So that is what he now gathered and put in this book. You understand? So you get the book, you can read it, you're going to get new informations you've never heard, you've never gotten before about the Yoruba. So that's it for the video. While we're still searching for the origin and the history of the Yorubas and more interesting stories about the Yorubas, please do not forget to subscribe to my channel, and also turn on the notification button, so that when next time I'm uploading new videos, you're going to be the first to be notified. And also I also have a section in this my channel that actually talks about the Yoruba language, where I'm teaching interested learners in the Yoruba language. So there are some interesting videos there you could watch, like the Yoruba alphabets, the days of the week and months of the year, and also talked about the Yoruba toner marks. So there are a lot of interesting videos I placed out there that you might find interesting. So you can also go there and pick anyone, in fact, I would love you guys to watch all the videos there, because I actually made them specifically for you, and they are all interesting. So please do not forget to subscribe to my channel, and thank you for staying up to this time on this video. Thank you, and bye for now.